Have you ever opened a company's financial report and just your eyes glazed over? Well, we're going to change all that today. Think of us as business detectives. We're taking a super dense document and turning it into a story you can actually understand. Our case file? It's for a company called BPL Limited. And by the end of this, you'll know how to find the real story hidden inside the numbers.
So, right off the bat, this is what we're up against. It's just a wall of data, right? A bunch of tags, values, and references. It honestly looks like an intimidating puzzle. This is the kind of stuff built for machines, not for people. But here's the secret. Every single number in there is a clue. Our job is to find the right ones and piece this story together.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you take all of that data chaos and turn it into a clear story? A story of success, or maybe a story of struggle, or even a dramatic comeback. Well, that is exactly what being a business detective is all about. And together, we are going to crack this case. Okay, so let's get to know our subject. The case file is for BPL Limited. So what do? They're in the business of consumer electronics. You know, things like TVs, refrigerators, all that stuff you'd find in a home. And that context is really important because it helps us understand the world they're playing in. You ready to start digging? As any good detective knows, the first rule is always follow the money. Where's it coming from and how much of it is there? This is what we call the revenue story, or the top line. It's the absolute starting point for any investigation like this. So the very first clue we're looking for is something called revenue from operations. Now, it sounds a little jargony, but it's actually a really simple and powerful idea. This isn't money from some random side deal or a weird investment. Nope. This is the cash BPL earned from doing its main job, selling electronics. It's really the purest way to see how their core business is actually doing. And boom, here is our first piece of hard evidence. For the 3-month period ending in June of 2018, BPL's operations brought in 21.1 crore rupees. Now, we're starting here because this was a pretty good period for them, so think of this number as our baseline. It's what a healthy, profitable quarter can look like for this company. Keep this number in mind, it's going to be important later. But of course, a business isn't just about the money that comes in the door. A huge part of the story is where all that money goes. So, for the next phase of our investigation, let's trace the money flowing out. We're talking about the company's costs and expenses. Now this chart, this tells the story of one really tough quarter for them, September 2019. And one clue just jumps right out. I mean, look at that massive slice of the pie. Nearly 3/4 of all their spending, 74%, went to just one thing, purchases of stock. So for every dollar they spent, 74 cents went right back out the door, just to buy the products they hope to sell. That is a huge commitment, and it's a critical clue for what we're about to see next. Okay, so we've followed the money in, and we've traced the money out. Now it's time for that moment every detective waits for. It's time to put the two sides together for the big reveal. Did the company actually make a profit, or did it end up with a loss? And wow, this slide just lays out the whole drama perfectly. On the left, you've got June 2018, the good times. Income and expenses are almost perfectly balanced, leaving them with a small profit. But then look at the right, September 2019. The scales have tipped, and dangerously. Even though they brought in more revenue, they spent way more, leading to a pretty big loss of 3.6 crore rupees. So what in the world happened in that quarter? All right, let's put that tough quarter under the microscope. The total income BPL brought in was 33.8 crore rupees. Now, if you just looked at that number by itself, you'd think, hey, that's pretty good. It's way up from the other period we saw. But remember, in any good investigation, a single clue is only half the story. Because in that exact same period, their total expenses were 37.4 crore rupees. And there it is. That's our problem. They spent almost 4 crore more than they earned. The scale has definitely tipped, and it's not in the right direction. And here you have it, the bottom line, the final calculation, a net loss of 3.6 crore rupees. So here's the key takeaway. Even though they brought in a lot of money, their costs, especially for buying all that stock, were so high that they ended up in the red. The case is really starting to come together now. So we've solved the mystery of one bad quarter. But any good detective knows you have to zoom out to see the real pattern. A single quarter is just one clue. The trend is the real story. So let's read between the lines and see what's really going on here. This timeline really shows the BPL roller coaster. We're looking at something called earnings per share, which is basically just how much profit or loss the company made for each of its shares. And you can see the wild ride. A tiny profit back in June 2018, then a drop into a loss, and then an even bigger loss by September 2019. But then, hold on, look at March 2020. A massive, totally unexpected jump into a huge profit. What happened? That just doesn't fit the pattern at all. Looks like we have a new mystery on our hands.
And here is the final twist in our case. That surprise profit, it had nothing to do with selling more TVs. In fact, if you look at their actual business, they lost a staggering 20 crore rupees that quarter. The hero of the story, the one thing that saved the bottom line, was a weird line item called tax expense. But look closely, it's a negative number. That means it wasn't an expense at all. It was a giant tax credit of over 21 crore rupees. That credit completely erased the massive loss from their business and created the illusion of a profitable quarter.
Which brings us to probably the most important lesson from this whole investigation. That final number you see, the bottom line profit or loss, it can be really misleading. The real clues, the truth about whether a company is actually healthy, are almost always hidden in the details, just like that weird tax credit.
And just like that, you've cracked your first case. Seriously, you followed the money in and out. You spotted a really volatile trend, and you uncovered an anomaly, realizing that a company's profit might not always come from its actual business. You now have the basic tools to look past the big headlines and find the real story for yourself.
But you know, every detective knows that cracking one case just opens up a whole new set of questions. So I'm going to leave you with this one to think about. Now that you know their profit came from a one-time tax event and not from their business, what other clues would you go looking for to figure out if BPL is truly a healthy company? The investigation continues.